Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Basra Daf Chaf Gimel Basra 23. The Daf Yomi is dedicated for Yeshua for Am Yisrael, Hatzal for the Shvuyim, Shmira for the Chayalim. In this Eis Sarah, the Daf Yomi is Bava Basra Chaf Gimel 23. We're going to start on 22b, the last line, where Gemara says we're discussing this idea of Grama ben Nezikin is Asar, that indirect damages with respect to Nezikin is prohibited, even though you might not be chayiv to pay, you might not be able to pay, it's still going to be prohibited. So Zok the Gemara, Rav Yosef, the Gemara says, Rav Yosef has a story, Havu Hanu Tali. Rav Yosef had some small palm trees, the Havu Asu Umne Vyasu Tutayu, that these bloodletters used to come, and what happened was they would sit on their land, Tosfos says, and not on the land of Rav Yosef, but they were close to the proximity of Rav Yosef's palm trees. Also, Orve and Okli Daman. So the ravens were coming and eating the blood from Rav Yosef, eating the blood from the bloodletters. And then they were flying up afterwards to the dates and ruining the palm trees. So Amruhu Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef said, "Afikuli korkar mehacha." He said, "Get rid of the ravens. Get rid of the blood. You're bringing the ravens here. You're ruining my palm trees." Amrei Abaye. Abaye says, "But wait, how can you do this? Gramu, it's just an indirect damage. They're not directly damaging you." So Rav Yosef said, "Amrei Hachi Amrav Tuvi Barmasna." This is exactly what we just said on the previous step. Those Someris Grama ben Ezekin is also indirect damages with respect to damages is prohibited. But then Abaye raised another problem by Ichsaklu, but you've been allowing them to do this. They have a chazaka that it's okay. It's not clear exactly how long you establish such a chazaka, but that's for a different discussion. But you've allowed them to do it. So the Gemara says that Rav Yosef responds, no, even though you've allowed somebody to do something, when it comes to damages, we don't establish a chazaka. Gemara says, but wait, didn't we limit that case? Rav Mari Amar Bakutra, Rav Zvid Amar Beisaki say that when do we say you're not allowed, that you can't say you have a chazaka to do this type of damage? That's by smoking, or that's by smoke, or by a Beisaki say by smell. But in this case, it's not like that. So Amalei Hani Udidi Danina Daita Kikutro Beisaki Sidamolis. Rav Yosef said no. From my perspective, because I'm a aninus, I'm like I have fine needs. I'm an istinus. Therefore, with respect to me, the blood on my dates is like the smoke, and also like the smell of the bathroom. Or Moshe Feinstein cited this Gemara when somebody said, "I have a chazaka, I could smoke in the base medrash." He said, "No, there's no chazaka for smoke." Says the Mishnah, "Marchikenes hashovach min ha'ir chamishim ama." That if you want to have your dovecote, the dovecote is basically like a contraption which you put on a pole, and that's where the doves go. You have to distance it 50 amos from the city, because or else they're going to start eating from the food in the city. And even if you're not in the city and you're a field, you can't make the dovecote unless you have 50 amos in every direction. Rabbi Yehuda says, Beis Arba'os Kurin Milo Shagar Hayona. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you need to have more than 50 amos in every direction. You need to have a place of 4 kurin in every direction, which is as far as the dove can fly. That's approximately 273 amos of the Rambam in each direction. Ve'im lachol, and if you purchased the field from somebody else, a field based rova, so even a much smaller amount, if a quarter kav, then it's going to be in the presumptive status that it's allowed to be up, and because the person you purchased it from presumably had permission. So Gemara says chamishim amma v'sum lo. You only have to be 50 amos from the city. That's it for aminoi. But we have a contradictory source, because we said in Baba Kama in person nishavim uyonim elam kina yarachok min yishuv shloshim ris. So that you have to be, if you want to set out traps to catch doves, you have to be 30 ris away, which is 4 mil, which is 8,000 amos, much farther away. And so because otherwise you're going to catch the birds of the city. So we see that they don't just fly 50 amos, they fly 8,000 amos. Tuva. Yeah, when it comes to flying, they can fly very far away. Ukrasayu, but when they eat, Chamisha Mamasa they eat the first thing they get, so you don't have to be worried about the first 50 amos. Umeshat Shloshim Ris Visulo. So is that really the case that you only have to be worried that they're going to fly 30 ris, and that's it? But Daniel, but Yishuv, I feel meal while you froze. We have a brisa that says in the Yishuv, if it's a place where people live, you have to be even 100 mil away. So the Gemara explains, Rav Yosef Amar B'Yishuv Kramim. Rav Yosef says, no, that's what we're talking about. You have to be worried even 100 mil away. That's where there's a vineyard, so they fly from one place to another to another. Rava says, B'Yishuv Shofchen. Rava says, no, now we're talking about a place where there are dovecotes all along the way, so they could stop and rest, like rest stops. Gemara says, well, if there's rest stops there, of course, you don't even need to be 100 mil. There's obviously a dovecote stop. So then you'll be trapping those doves and who live there. So the Gemara gives three answers. He buys a D-Day. Well, maybe the guy set up his own rest stop, so that'll help the birds to fly farther. So then he doesn't have to worry he's stealing them. He buys a the Kanani, or maybe it's owned by a Canaanite. And even according to the one we learned from the dispute in Bava Basra whether or not you're allowed to gazel from a Canaanite, even according to one who says it's not allowed, it's only not allowed because of Darkei Sholem. And here, this whole thing is because of Darkei Sholem. It's not real theft, so it's a stringency which doesn't apply to the Canaanites. You buy the same with the Hefker, or maybe they just had these rest stops put up, but they're abandoned now, and so therefore you don't have to worry about taking those pigeons. Rabbi Yehuda says, Beis Arba'as Kurin. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to do more than 50 amos in each direction. You have to do 4 Kurin, and if you purchased it, then even a quarter kav is going to be considered like it was allowed. So the Gemara says from here, Rav Papa comes along and says, "V'temer Zvid." Some say it's Rav Papa, some say it's Rav Zvid. Zosomeris. We're going to learn from here. Tonin lokech v'tonin loyorish. So this relates to the big machotes we're going to get, or the big sugya we're going to get in the next parak, Cheskas Abatim, a very classic, one of the classics chapters in the Talmud. That we know that you have a presumptive status that you have. Let's say you've been living on the land for 3 years. Then and you don't have the contract anymore to show you bought it, we believe you. But it's not just enough to say you've been living there. You also have to claim that I bought it. You can't just say I moved on here without permission. That means with a taina. You have to be a chazaka with a taina. But let's say you inherited it. So you don't know what your father did, or you bought it from somebody else. You don't know if that person had bought it. So do we make the claim on your behalf? Do we assume that we can make the claim? So from the fact that we say here in our Mishnah that if you purchased it from somebody, we assume that that person had the rights to do it. That means that we are here, says Rav Papa, or some say Rav Zvid, in the case where the person who has the property is not capable of making the claim, we'll make the claim on your behalf. We'll assume that we can make the claim. Make a claim for a purchaser or for an heir. So the Gemara says, well, Yoresh Tanina, didn't we already learn the case of Tonin Yoresh? We already learned this case. We learned it explicitly in a Mishnah, because what did we learn in the Mishnah? We're going to see that. What does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says the following. The Mishnah will say the following: that if you get the land as an inheritance, you don't need to make the claim. So the Gemara says, yeah, we don't need it for the case of the Yerusha, we need it for the case of the Lokeach, the purchaser, it's Tzricholei. The Gemara says, Lokeach Nami Tanina. No, that's also going to be a Mishnah later on, because what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, Lokach Chotzer Uba Zizim Megusastros, Areze Bechaskasa. Let's say you have a courtyard and has some things jutting out into the public domain. We're going to assume that you have a presumptive right to put these things in the public domain. And so therefore, for this reason, since you have the presumptive right to put these things in the public domain, it must be that we're saying that we make the claim on your behalf. Even though you don't know because you purchased it, we assume that it was allowed. So we have the case of that we make a taina for a Yoresh and a Lokeach. So why does Rav Papa or Rav Zvid have to make this statement? Gemara says, Sricha, they need to make the statement. Yashmin and Hasam, because if we just had a case over there, i.e., Gabe, if we just had the case over there, Gabe was just Arabim. If we just had the case where you have your stuff going into the public domain and we say it's clear that the community gave you the right to put it up, who gave you the right? By the way, the Tosfos says the Zayin Tuvi Yair, the community council gave you the right to put it up. We would say in that case, Asam Gabi Rishus Arabim, Deim or Konas Utol Shalohum. Maybe there we allow it because maybe you had waived, you had moved your fence into your property, so you could have more flexibility to put out stuff going into the public domain. Or inami achuli achul b'nei rishus harabim, or maybe the community waived their rights to you. But in our case here, it's not dealing with community, so maybe we wouldn't say it. And also, if we just have the case here, I would say the kiman de yachad hill. Well, maybe since the guy in the field was just dealing with one individual, he was able to appease him. Or he waived his rights. But in the case of the community, who is going to have the ability, who's allowed to receive the money, or who's allowed to waive the rights of the community? So maybe we wouldn't say that we make the taina. So therefore, we say in both these cases, tzricha. Therefore, we need in both cases. Says the Gemara, so that if you purchase it, it's going to be in your. We make the assumption that you had the right to have the dovecoat. So Gemara says, don't we just say this above? Rav Nachman says in the name of Rabbi Baravua, we don't allow this claim to say that you had a right to do something when it comes to damages. So Rav Mari Amar Bakutra, Rav Zvida Amar Besakise. No, that's limited to a case of smoke or to the case of smell coming from the bathroom. Now we go on to the next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Nipol animtza b'toch chamishim ama. So let's say, what's it? Nipol? It's a gozel. It's basically like a little baby chick that fell out of. Rabbeinu Gershom says it fell out of the dovecote, and you find it on the ground. If it's within 50 amos of the dovecote, then we're going to say it belongs to the owner of the dovecote. Chutz mechamishim amos. Let's say it's beyond 50 amos. Then if it's beyond 50 amos, and whoever finds it gets to keep it. Nimtza bein shnei shovachos. Let's say it's between two dovecotes equally. Whichever one is closer gets to keep it. So let's say it's 50-50 exactly. So then we're going to say shneim yachoku. We're going to say that they both have to split it. If it's 50-50, they both have to split it. So Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina gives a tremendous inyan here. What does Rabbi Chanina say? Rov v'karov halchen achar arov. We have two principles in the Torah. We have the principle of achrei rav mahatos, that we follow the majority. It says it explicitly in the Torah in Exodus 23. Follow the majority. We have this. This is a principle that appears throughout the Shas. We follow the majority. And we have a karov, where we have a case where we follow proximity. It says, this refers to the case of the Egel Arufa, where Rachmana Litzlan, you find a dead body on the outskirts of a town. And then the elders of the town have to measure which is the closest town, and that town has to go through the ritual called the Egel Arufa, where they take a calf to a wadi, and they kill the calf, and they say our hands do not spill this blood. So let's say you have two competing principles here. Let's say you have one thing which is a majority and one thing which is closer. We follow, says Rabbi Chanina, we follow the majority. Why? Why do we follow the majority? So Pnei Yeshua says, because the robe is the basic principle. Majority is the majority principle throughout the Talmud. We follow the majority because it is the majority. It's a little bit ironic. That's what the Pnei Yeshua said. Even though both are principles that come from the Torah, the majority principle comes first. So Masav Rabbi Zera, what about the fact that we have by a red heifer, by a Egel Arufa, by a decapitated calf? It says whichever city is closer to the dead body. But it doesn't imply that even if there be another city which is greater than that, than this city, and we still follow the one that's closer. So doesn't that prove Rov Karov we follow close proximity and not the majority? The Gemara says no. The Gemara says no. Bidaleka. There's no other city there, so it's just the closer one. The Gemara says Velezel Patsa Ruba de Alma. Yeah, but why don't we attribute the dead body to the Ruba de Alma, the majority of the world? The Gemara says no. Biosheves Bein Harem. We're talking about a case where it's really in a secluded spot. It's in the mountains. There's nothing else nearby. So then the Gemara says, well, we'll challenge Rabbi Chanina from our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? Says in our Mishnah that if you find a little baby chick within 50 amos of the dovecote, then it's going to belong to the owner of the dovecote. And even though there's another one which is closer to it, even though there's another one which is closer to it. Now we see from here that we follow. Excuse me, not another one that's closer. There's another one that's greater than it. So we see from here, proximity versus majority. We follow the proximity and not the majority. Gemara says, no, same answer, but the lake. There isn't another city there. Gemara says, well, you can't give that answer. Ema Seifa. The next part says, if it's outside the 50 amos, it belongs to the one who finds it. And if there's no other city that's nearby, for sure, it fell from the one that was in the town. Meaning, if it's 51 amos and there's no other city for miles, for sure it came from that dovecote. Nor says, no, what we're talking about in our Mishnah, what's the whole kimta of our Mishnah? The whole Rashi says, Kula masnisa mitarza b'medada. We're going to explain that the whole Mishnah is talking about a bird that's medada. Meaning to say this chick does not yet know how to fly. And so therefore it only hops around little by little. So therefore, if it will be within 50 amos of the dovecote, even though there's another one that's greater than that, we're going to attribute it to the one to the dovecote that's within 50 amos. Because we have a principle, any bird that knows how to hop, it only hops 50 amos. And outside of 50 amos, if you find it, so since it doesn't hop more than 50 amos, we're going to say it's no longer a hopper and it's a flyer. And therefore we follow the rest of the world and you can keep it. So that's the basic principle. So that's what our Mishnah is talking about, a case where if it's within 50 amos, you attribute it to the dovecote because it's a hopper. Outside of 50 amos, it's a flyer. So the Gemara says, "The Amar Rav Ukva Bar Chama Ko Amdada Ein Medada Yotzer Mina." Anything that's a hopper, you don't hop more than 50, and that's why within 50 amos we attribute it to the dovecote. So now comes along Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah is known throughout Shas for having for being me'akbed and medayek and asking very exacting questions. So by Rabbi Yirmiyah, he asked the following question, which got him in a tremendous amount of trouble. He says, Raglo achas betoch non ama v'raglo achas chutz michamishim ama. Let's say he has one leg within 50 amos and one leg outside of 50 amos. What do you do to this bird? So he answers, the Gemara says, "Va'alda afku Rabbi Yirmiyah min Beit Midrasha." Because of this, they threw Rabbi Yirmiyah out of the base medrash. Because of this, they threw Rabbi Yirmiyah out of the base medrash. Well, it's so big deal. The Mishnah itself talks about a case where it was mechzal mech, so it was 50-50. Why are they throwing him out? So Rashi says he was matriach aleim. He was annoying them. Tosfos says no. The problem was because the stage is established. It's not going to be more than 50. So he's coming along and saying it's more than 50. For this, they threw him out. The Yad Ramah says that the reason why they kicked him out was because clearly you should split it. I heard the vor, it's like this, that what does it mean that they threw him out when he asked his question, 1 foot within 50 and 1 foot without 50? Because when it comes to Torah, we need to have both feet in. When it comes to the major important issues in our life, you can't have 1 foot in this camp, 1 foot in this camp. You have to be both feet in. Both feet in, you have to be all in. And Rabbi Yirmiyah, he was asking a question, you have 1 foot in 50, 1 foot out 50. Oh, they said, oh, you're a person and you're not ready to commit So they tossed him out of the base medrash. And we know that he was out of the base medrash till Daf Kuf Samachay. Kuf Samachay, Rav Yirmiyah asked the bottom of a kasha. He asked a great question, and they said, "Oh, you could come back in." And that's 142 days later. They kicked Rav Yirmiyah out of the base medrash for 142 days. So the Gemara now says, "Tashma." The Gemara is still challenging Rabbi Chanina from the end of our Mishnah because again, Rabbi Chanina says, "Rov v'karov," we follow after the rov. So he says, "Rov v'karov," we follow after the rov. So then we have a tremendous question. It says, "Nimtza bein shnei shuv chos karov v'zeh shalo v'karov v'zeh shalo." So he says that we found. Now we said if you find in between two dovecoats, if it goes to this one, he belongs to him, and if it goes to this one, belongs to that one. Even though one of them is greater, this is within 50 amos. So this is a direct question on Rabbi Chanina. So Gemara says, no, no, there they have the same amount. Gemara says, but still, Ezel Basar Rubadama. Why don't we follow the majority? Gemara says, no, the reason why we don't follow the majority, and why don't we say that this pigeon came from another place and we don't know who the owner is, and therefore you get to keep it? So, I mean, we're talking about a case where it's outside of Chamishim Amos. Rashi says, the assumption here is you find it between the two dovecoats outside of 50 amos because it's no longer a hopper. So what are we talking about here? Bishvil shel kramim, that it was able to hop outside of the 50 amos by resting on the vineyard. And so therefore we don't go follow the majority of the world, because since it's a hopper, and so therefore it's clearly attached to a nest, therefore it's clearly a hopper. It's not from the rest of the world. So therefore it's on the vineyard. Because if it was really coming from the rest of the world, keeping the medadi, then keeping the medadi will mati asa. So since it can't fly, it can only hop. Therefore, it's not going to come from anywhere else. Because any little chick, that when it hops, it still sees its nest. When it puts its head back, it's going to continue to hop. But if it doesn't see its nest, it's not going to continue to hop. And so therefore, it's not possible to say that it came from something far away place by the vineyards. We'll stop the recording here. We can go on for a couple of minutes, but we'll stop the recording here. If anybody has any